And now we're on Daf Beis Amud Beis, and we're offering another explanation as to why our Mishnah uses the word niknes. Inami sados bakesef yiknu. This is a pasuk in Yirmiyahu Navi, and it tells us you acquire fields with money, and the acquisition is called kinyan, yiknu, and therefore Kiddushin through kesef is also considered yiknu. And Tanya Isha niknes, therefore, our Mishnah prefers to use the word kinyan. So, Frekti Gemara, okay, you've answered our Mishnah. Now let's fast forward to the first Mishnah in the second parak. The Nisnei Hasam Ish Kona. Why not be consistent if you're using the word kinyan? And the Gemara answers, "May kara tani lishna doraisa lebasof tani lishna dirabanan." Marriage comes under two distinct concepts. Number one, kinyan, and number two, Kiddushin or Hegdish. Now, the language of kinyan appears in the Torah itself, as we saw, whether it be in the case of Avraham Avinu, Nasati Kesef Hasoda Kaf, and then it says Hasoda Shakon Avram. So we see that the word kinyan applies to acquiring a field. And elsewhere, we saw in the pasuk in Yirmiyah, Sados Bakesef Yiknu. So the language of acquisition as kinyan appears in the Torah, in Tanakh, more than once. And that's called a Lishna Doraisa. And the first Mishnah in the Masechet is going to prefer and give first choice to a Lishna Doraisa. Levasof, when we get to a later Mishnah, Tani Lishna D'Rabbanan, my Lishna D'Rabbanan, the Asala Kuli Alma Kehegdish. The Rabbanan say that marriage is called Kiddushin, Miloshin Hegdesh, because just like if you magdish something, after consecrating your property, it becomes prohibited for the whole world under the Isur Me'ilah. So too, through Kiddushin, you are like consecrating her, meaning you are generating an Isur, not a Kinyan Mammon, but a Kinyan Isur, that prohibits her on the entire world. Fine. Okay, our Mishnah at the beginning of the Masechta, Lishna Doraisa, that's called Kinyan. The Mishnah later on, Lishna D'Rabbanan, that's called Hegdesh. Frekta Gemara, I'm still not happy. V'nisnei hacha ish koneh. Why isn't the man the active persona? He is being kona and isha, and yet it says isha nikne. She is being acquired. And the Gemara answers mishum de kaboila misnei seifa v'kones atzma bidida. The Mishnah wants to use a language that's consistent. And when the Mishnah here in the Seif of our first Mishnah speaks about her acquiring herself, it says Kones Atzma. Is Tani Nami Reisha B'dida, the subject of the Reisha is she rather than he, so that there's a certain integrity and consistency in the Mishnah, and she becomes the subject, and therefore it's her Isha Niknes. And that parallels the Seifa, V'kones Atzma. Frekta Gemara, I don't understand. V'nisnei ha'ish kone umakne. Why couldn't the Mishnah say and be consistent using the man as the active agent in both the Reish and the Seif, and there'll be a consistency? And it could have said ha'ish kone, similar to the Mishnah in the second parak, ish makadesh, and he's the active agent. And umakna, and he's the active agent that, so to speak, releases her from the kinyan. Now, obviously, this is going to be difficult because if it's a gerushin, then he's actively releasing her from the kinyan and the isur. But in the case of misas habal, that's not active. So the Gemara says mishum deika misas habal delav iuka makni. You want to say it should have said umakna in the Seifa. It can't say umakna because it's referring equally to gerushin and to misa. And laviu kamakni, he's not actively minashamaya hu kamakni. The heaven is releasing him. This reminds me of the famous story about Rabbi Kiva. They brought a recalcitrant husband in front of Rabbi Kiva. He refused to divorce his wife. And there was halachic reasoning and justification for her claim that he has to divorce, but he refused. So Rabbi Kiva said to him, looking him deep in the eyes, the Mishnah says, "V'kones atzma beget ubemisas habal." You take the choice. The man walked out, and when he got to the door, he dropped dead. Now, I can't vouch for the story, but I think it's a true story about Rabbi Kiva. So that's called Min Hashamayim Hu Demaknile. Listen, man, if you're not going to be makna her and release her by giving her a get, Min Hashamayim, they'll take care of it. Iboy Seima. Now we give another explanation for the language of Isha Niknes, where the subject is her. To Itana Kona, if it would have said her Ish Kona, Havamina Filu Bal Karcha. Just like in Gerushin, he could divorce her against her will, we might think that he could marry her against her will. Tanya Isha Niknes. Niknes means midaita in shalom midaita lo. You cannot acquire a woman in Kiddushin without her will, without her hisratzis. You might ask, well, in Kiddushin, she doesn't say yes. He just gives her the ring. But the answer is that since she hears him say, Harei B'Kudeshli, and she accepts the ring, that indicates her ratzon, and therefore it's midait. Frekta Gemara, my area to Tani Shalosh. Why does the Mishnah use the feminine term Shalosh, Misnei Shlosha? And the Gemara answers, Mishum de Kaboy, Lemisnei Derech. V'derech Loshan Nekevah. So it says, Isha Niknes B'Shalosh Drachim, and a derech is lashon nekeva. How do I know the derech is a lashon nekeva? Vodata lahem es haderech asher yelchu ba. Pasuk in Shlosh Ches, and it says ba. Ba is in the feminine, referring to derech. So the Gemara asks, "V'elaha the Tanya." What about a Mishnah in Zavim? In the second chapter, it says b'shiva drachim bodkim es hazav. And the word Shiva is in masculine, and yet it's referring to drachim. Nisli Shevet should have used the feminine. And the answer is Mishum de Kaboy lemisnei derech. Now the Gemara is going to push for the fact that derech is actually lashon zachar. It's in the masculine, even though we saw earlier Vodat lemes haderech shel yelchu ba that derech is in the feminine. Ashkan derech to ikri lashon zach. Where do we find that derech is in the masculine? Dichsiv, as the pasuk says at the end of Sefer Dvarim, the derech echad yetzu elecha. In the Milchama, they'll go through one road, one pathway. Ubeshiva drachim yanusu lifanecha. And in 7 different drachim, or ways, they shall flee from before you. This is a great avtacha if we observe the Torah properly. So wait a second. Now we have 2 psukim. We have one pasuk, Aderech shel yelchu ba, indicating that derech is nekeva. Now we have a pasuk that says shiva drachim, and the word shiva is in zachar. Yochi kasha kroy adodi. We have a stira. One pasuk kashanam maslisan adod, and we have a word derech that in Zavin is in Zachar, and it says Shiva in B'dikas Za, and yet in our Mishnah it says V'kones atzma b'shalosh drachim, and the word shalosh is in the feminine, where it answers Kroy hadodi lo kash. If you find a steer in the psukim, that's not a steer, because hacha Torah koi, when we're dealing with a pasuk in the Torah, then Torah is lashon nekeva, ikri lashon nekeva. Tichsiv Torah Hashem tmima, meshivas nafsh. So the word tmima is in the feminine. It's describing Torah. Torah is in the feminine. Is therefore kasav la b'lashon nekeva. So anything that's related to the Torah law we're going to use derech in a lashon of nekeva. I'm sorry, not a Torah law, but I mean anything in the 5 books of Moses. But hasam de milchama koi, darko shel ish lasos milchama vein darko shel isha lasos milchama. So in the parsha milchama, the Torah goes out of its way to use the masculine term, because it's a man who goes to war. Now you ask me, what about the steer between our Mishnah here of Sholosh and the Mishnah in Zavin that says Shiva, which is Zachar? Excuse me. Here in our Mishnah, we're talking about a woman. Is Ketani Lo B'Lashon Nekeva, then we'll choose that derech should be a feminine word, and therefore Sholosh Zachar. But Hasam, with regard to a Zav, L'gabi Ish Koi. Now, how do we know that the B'dika in the Mishnah Zavin is only for an Ish, a Zav? And therefore, we're going to use the Lashon Shiva with a Hey at the end, meaning Zachar. Maybe the Mishnah is referring to a B'dika of a Zava. And the answer is Darko Shalish Li Badek, being Darko Shalish Li Badek. So in the case of a Zav, if he had an emission ba'ones, then it's not metam. And therefore, we have to check him in 7 different ways. But in the case of an Isha, she becomes Tmeya, even ba'ones, is Tani Lashon Zof. My Taima Tani Sholosh. So why does the Tana use the word Sholosh here in our Mishnah? Again, we have a justification of Shiva in the Lashon Zocher in the case of Zav, but why here does he use Sholosh? Mishum Drachim. And we said that Drachim is Lashon Nekeva Haderech Hashal Yelchu Ba. Frekte Gemara Nisnei Dvarim. Why does the Mishnah use Dafka the word Drachim? Why not Dvarim? And then it would have said 3 in the masculine. And the Gemara answers Mishum de Kaboila Misnei Bia. Ubia Ikri Derek. We have a pasuk in Mishlei that indicates that Bia is a Derek. Tichsiv Derek Gever Bi'alma. The way of a man with a young woman came Derek Isha Mina Efes. Likewise is the way or the derech of an adulterous woman. So therefore, Bia is called derech. Mora says, why did the Mishnah have to use the word derech when it's referring also to Kes V'Shtar? And the Gemara answers, Mishum Bia. And even though Bia is 1 out of 3, we still choose the word derech for Bia. V'tani Tata Tuchada. Why do you choose the word derech based on 1 of the 3? Why not choose the word dvarim based on 2 out of the 3? And that's the rule of majority rules. My answer is Hanach Nami Tzorach Bia Ninu. Even Kesef and Shtar are for the purpose of Bia. Notice Kiddushin is the first stage that leads to Nisuin, and Nisuin means Bia. So the word derech, although it applies directly only to Bia, nevertheless, it's appropriate even for Kesef and Shtar. Ibais Ema. The Gemara now gives an alternative explanation for the word derech, the choice of the word derech. Mani Rabbi Shimon. The author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Shimon, and he understands that the derech of human nature is relevant to Kiddushin. The Sanya Rabbi Shimon Omer Mipnei Ma Omra Torah Ki Yikach Ish Isha V'lo Kosav Ki Tilochach Isha Le'ish. Why the emphasis on the man as the active agent? Why not Ki Tilochach, that she will be taken? And the answer is because of human nature. If they should darko shall ish lechazer al isha, the ain't darko shall ish isha lechazer al ish. A man seeks out a woman, but a woman doesn't pursue the man. Mashali adam sha'avdallah aveda mi chozer mi bal aveda mechazal avdos. If you lose something, then you will take the initiative to seek out the object and try to find it. The Gemara now asks for Atnan, Bezayin Drochim Bodkim Sazav Lisnei Dvarim. Once you mention the Mishnah in Zavim, then why in Zavim do you prefer the word derech over and above the word Dvarim? Hasam Chaka Mashmalon did Darka. The Mechla Yisera Lasuye Deva. If a person exceeds his eating, that will bring him to Zava, and that's called derech. The Darka de Mishte Yisera Suli de Ziva. And if he's excessively drinking, that'll bring him to Ziva. So it's appropriate to use the word derech because it's Darka Lemechel, and that brings on the Ziva, the state of Ziva. Frekte Gemara of Hadisnan Esrog Shavalilam Begimel Drachim Lisnei Dvarim. The rule of thumb is that the Mishnah always prefers, unless there's a reason otherwise, Dvarim over Drachim. So why does it say Esrog Shavalilam Begimel Drachim? Ishum to be Misnei Seifa Uli Yerek B'derech Echad. So the ratio of Gimel Drachim in the comparison between Esrog and Elon is Atu the Seifa Liyerek V'derech Echad. That the word derech is appropriate for Yerek. Frek Gemara Seifa Nami Nisnei Davar. So who says that in the case of a Yerek you should prefer the word derech and not Davar? And the Gemara is going to give a long explanation, which Amir Hashem on Daf Gimel will pick up tomorrow at 7:30. Okay, then. So let me say happily that we have a little far, as they call it. We're a little bit ahead of ourselves, which I think is excellent. Kiddushin is a Masechet that's full of drushos and yalfusos, a lot of technical stuff. In that sense, Kiddushin for Daf Yomi is a very challenging Masechet. Okay, have a great day.